Hey everybody, I'm Zale Mednick and welcome to another episode of Preconceived. If you're enjoying this podcast, please rate and review us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That is the best way you can support this podcast if you are enjoying it. Mark McNeely, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Glad to be here again.
So I want to first talk about the workflow. That really resonates with me, and that's something that I think I've seen myself be hesitant with and I've seen other people be hesitant with because it's accepting that ChatGPT actually is helpful and that it's not inauthentic and that it's not cheating. Like, I'm just thinking my workflow, I guess the easiest thing actually is about the podcast in terms of how I find guests, how I create outlines, how I write the introductions. I usually write the introductions by myself, but lately I've realized as I've been chatting with ChatGPT, saying, what are some interesting questions? Like, here are some questions that I think are good questions. Do you have any kind of examples that I could use to illustrate it as I'm asking the question? And as I did that, I realized, wait, let me just ask you after this whole conversation, do you have an introduction you could write for this episode? And frankly, the introduction is much more engaging and better than the introductions that I've done for the past 300 episodes. And should that now be part of my workflow? Well, it would save me a lot of time, but does it feel a little bit inauthentic?
Yeah.
So when I'm finding a guest, should I be Googling or should I be going into ChatGPT and saying, find me 3 guests who are experts in this area? And I use that not to make myself sound like a fraud, but because the reality is something as simple as a podcast, if I can do that, then something much more complex can obviously and probably should change the workflow, because I'm talking about saving myself 15 minutes. There are certain tasks where days, months could be saved by using some of these AI features if they're integrated into the general workflow. But it's challenging when people have had a workflow that they're so used to for years to change that.
Yeah. So a couple of things I'd say there is you will still need domain knowledge, right, to know what to ask. So Roger Bacon, who was the founder of the scientific method, said something to know what to ask is to already know half. Something like that, right? You need to know the right questions. And that's really what prompting is, right? So knowing what the right questions are to ask is, to do that, you have to have domain knowledge. So people like yourself and myself that have a lot of experience will know much better the questions to ask than someone who's just out of university, right? And then you need to have that domain knowledge in order to check what's coming back to see if it's any good. So yeah, it can write those things for you, but is it actually saying what you want it to say? If it is, then you're still playing a role, right? The other way to think about it is, am I creating it out of a whole cloth? Or, when you think about I'm making this picture, right? Well, did you create the picture from generative AI? Well, not really, because it created it, but the way I think about it is you inspired it. Like your thought, right, your prompt in there inspired it to come up with this creation, right? So you're still playing a role. It's more the inspirational role. You're providing the seed of thought, the germ of the thought, which then it now takes the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a couple ways to think about it. I was talking to the CEO of WebMD. He was former CEO of WebMD. He was a former CEO of WebMD. He now he's the CEO of another company, but he said...
you were going to say he was replaced by an AI.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other thing. They may be replaced. What he was saying is using AI is like starting every series in the red zone, like in football, right? It gets you 80% there, right? Or you can think of it the other way as I start with 20% and it takes it the other 80%, right? Which is like you're coming up with the idea for here's the idea for the podcast, right? Here's what I want to say. It writes it then, and then you check it at the end, right?
Yeah. So for people who are writing an essay, it's like, do you put the thesis in and they write the whole essay? You're giving 20% and they're doing 80%? Or do you put your essay in and say, hey, I'm 80% of the way there. I want you to fix this with an extra 20% of enhancement.
Yeah, and I think this is where at the university it becomes super important to you have to, before you let them use AI, you have to teach them the fundamentals. And we're seeing this in the interviews that our students are taking. So it's when they're in their interns, right, their internships, is they're actually not being allowed in the interviews or oftentimes in the internships to use AI, because what people are trying to test is can you do this without AI, right? We know you can do something pretty decent with AI, but can you do on your own? Do you have the domain knowledge to do something good, right, without AI? So you need to first, again, learn that domain knowledge of whatever it is your area of expertise is in order to ask the right questions and to understand what's coming back. Is that really right.